Lando Norris, a supremely popular character within the F1 paddock. He is known for his funny and witty behaviour, his endeavours in the world of content creation with his Quadrant brand, and his army of fangirls that will follow him to the ends of the earth. With all of that being said, it's not as if Lando doesn't have the speed to back all his off-track successes up. Quick in qualifying, with the race pace to back it up, he is one of the best drivers on the grid currently, in fiery form. There is just but one issue. He has been unable to convert many of his poles or opportunities into race wins, despite being on the grid for 5 years and having countless opportunities to do so. Over half of the current F1 grid has claimed a win before he had, including all 3 teammates that Norris has raced against. Yes, Piastri counts, I am including sprints. And when you're in a title battle with Max Verstappen of all people, you cannot afford to make mistakes. So, naturally, in this video I will go through each and every incident where Norris has bottled a potential race win or sprint win, explain what happened in the process, and then rate how bad the bottle was. As always, please like and subscribe for more videos like this. It's only 2 buttons and it really helps my videos to reach more of you guys. Now, without further ado, who never raced in F1? Hello everyone, I'm TMWF1, and this is why Lando Norris will not win the 2024 World Drivers' Championship. I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to YouTube, I'm a D1 hater. Of course, you guys know this throughout all my videos. I've hated some way, somehow. But I can't even lie, there was no opportunities to claim a win in 2019. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest, there's no way he was getting a win. In that car, in that field, with how bad the McLaren was, I say bad, it finished 4th, but the grid was too packed. McLaren had the 4th fastest car. They literally was only able to get 1 podium because of a Hamilton penalty at Brazil. I'm not that bad. Even I won't hate as much as that. So yeah, let's just move on to 2020. You guys would think that 2020 would be similar to 2019, in that there were no opportunities for Lando to take a maiden win in F1. And honestly, at first, I thought so too, until I rewatched the 2020 Italian Grand Prix. That race, Norris finished P4. But TMW F1, you may ask? P4 is nowhere near a race win and all the top 3 must have been in faster cars, right? Right? Brother, Now I will say this, even though he finished 6 seconds away from the lead, it has to be mentioned that the top 3 were in similarly placed and, in the case of Gasly, slower cars. It would have been a very slim opportunity for Norris to win the race, but an opportunity nonetheless. I definitely wouldn't call it a bottle, as he wasn't in a race winning position to begin with, but I would call it a missed opportunity. If he was in the position of his teammate Sainz, then I would compare it to the likes of 2023-24 Liverpool. 3 out of 10 bottle. In 2021, the MCL 35M was a much improved car from the MCL 35, with the car challenging for podiums regularly and on a few occasions in 2021, challenging for race wins. This happened on 2 occasions. I won't particularly count Imola since Norris's front row lap was invalidated and he got overtaken in the main race by Hamilton, who was literally in P8 upon the race restart. Such was his pace. Let's look at the first of 2 races, Monza 2021. For the sprint race, Lando had qualified P4 ahead of his teammate Ricciardo in P5. Upon the start, Norris was overtaken by Ricciardo before Gasly decided to leave his AlphaTauri seat by force. The safety car was called out and the race ended with Bottas winning, a rarity in 2021, Verstappen in 2nd, not so much of a rarity in 2021, Ricciardo in 3rd, most definitely a rarity in 2021, and Lando finishing P4. Bottas had incurred an engine penalty however, and had to start from last, bumping Verstappen up to pole, Ricciardo to the front row and Norris to 3rd. When the race got underway, Ricciardo had a great start and immediately got ahead of Verstappen and took the race lead. Hamilton overtook Norris to take P3, but lost it when he got forced off the track by Verstappen, allowing him to take P4. Norris then held Hamilton up until lap 22 when Hamilton overtook him at turn 4. Norris then pitted and came out ahead of both Verstappen and Hamilton, the 2 drivers having pit stops as slow as the 2024 Saubers. They then decided to mount each other, creating the Sauber C18. Brother, this is not WWE, what are you doing? This brought out the safety car, allowing Leclerc of all people to jump into P2. This lasted about 3 corners as Norris produced one of the overtakes of the season, overtaking him around Curva Grande. From then on it was a McLaren 1-2. One thing that must be noted, Norris was the faster car from the moment the safety car ended, but was told to hold position as not to ruin McLaren's chances of a 1-2. However, me personally, I would not let that slide. I do not care what fallout that produces, I would go for my first win, especially if my teammate is not in a fight for P3 like Norris was. This can be chalked down as not his fault, but he could have still won had McLaren allowed him to race. Ricciardo won and Norris followed suit, marking a great day for McLaren but a bittersweet one for Norris. 6 out of 10 bottle. But seeing that pace of the McLaren gave hope that there would surely be enough of an opportunity to win a race. Lando, I can't keep defending you, bro. Quite literally the next race. You know what? Let's just talk about what happened. Round 15 of the 2021 World Drivers' Championship. Practice was a pretty quiet affair until we got to practice 3. Because there was no practice 3. It was written off due to adverse weather conditions. It was pissing it. On to qualifying, and Max Verstappen was knocked out in Q1. Is he washed? Latifi better? No, he got a penalty for his penetrative activities against Lewis Hamilton's halo, and Red Bull decided to bin off his engine. Nothing in particular happened despite the rain until Q3. For the first runs, it seems like it was business as usual at the front with Hamilton on pole on the inters. Then the track started to dry, and George Russell started the max exodus into the pits to change tyres. And then, Lewis Hamilton hit the wall. This meant that he spent longer in the pits than he was meant to, messing up his Q3 run plan, leaving the door open for Carlos Sainz to take pole in a Ferrari that didn't know whether it was a midfield car or a front runner. But then, out of nowhere, Norris set the timing screens alight to take his first pole in F1. The 15-year-old fangirl celebrated, McLaren fans from the early 2000s celebrated, and somewhere in the world, Ron Dennis chuckled. McLaren was back. With Hamilton down in P4 and Verstappen down in last, things were looking good for Lando.
Who's finna tell, bro?
It was lights out at Sochi, and immediately Norris managed to bottle pole and allow Sainz to take the lead. Some things never change. Thankfully, Norris took the lead back on lap 12 and it looked like he would sail off into the distance. However, he forgot to account for one little detail. Lewis Hamilton wasn't washed yet. The former McLaren world champion chased down Lando with impending danger, bringing the gap to under a second by lap 47. But then, the rain came. Just a light drizzle at first, it transformed into a shower in certain parts of the track, with it becoming near impossible just to stay on the track. The engine is up and down the grid suggested pitting, and pit crew started to file down the pit lane. First to pit was Valtteri Bottas down in 14th on lap 48, and others followed suit including Verstappen and Sainz on lap 49. Now, if you saw everyone pitting for intermediate tyres, and you heard your engineer telling you that it's advisable to box, a normal person would, listen, right? I mean, all the engineers have the forecast data, they surely know better, right? Well, not Lando Norris. Despite being told to box multiple times, Lando decided not to listen to him as Hamilton boxed on lap 50. The rain intensified down at turn 4, Norris lost a 25-second gap he accumulated by not pitting, and then finally, on lap 51, he aquaplaned off the track at turn 4, losing the lead 2 laps from the end. Hamilton won that race by 53 seconds, his second biggest win margin ever and his 100th ever win, the first to break into 3 digits. Norris finished P7, and to this day, this was the biggest bottle of his career. Granted, he was young and probably never had been in that situation before, but honestly, he should have taken his engineer's advice. If he had done so, I would not be making this video, 100%. It was a sad and disappointing end to an amazing race weekend, and this was the race that will come to mind when we use the term Lando no wins, and this is our first 10 out of 10 bottle. In 2022, the McLaren struggled quite a bit under the new regulations, and at the start of the season they were quite a bit off the pace, save for Imola, where Norris managed to finish on the podium. Not including that, the McLaren was the 5th fastest car and was not able to challenge the top 3 teams under most circumstances. The 2023 car, post-Austria, was the 2nd fastest car on the grid excluding a couple of races, putting Lando Norris and new teammate Oscar Piastri in positions they could only dream of in Bahrain of that year. This included 2 races, where Lando was in a position to win a race, but failed. Let's look at the big one first, Singapore 2023. Let's set the scene. It's practice, and the dominant Red Bull seemed to be lacking in pace. Sergio Perez was nowhere to be found, which is usual, he nearly lost to Hamilton in a post-2021 Mercedes, and Max Verstappen was languishing out of the top 3, which was definitely unusual. On to qualifying, and in Q2,
Noda's on a decent lap. Oh, it looks like he's backed out of it, has he? In the final sector.
How about Liam Lawson? Can Liam Lawson make it through? He can!
Liam Lawson, in only his 3rd race, had managed to knock Verstappen out of Q2 on pure pace, leaving the race wide open for the first non-Red Bull win of the year. In the end, it was Carlos Sainz who took pole position, with Norris down in P4. At the start of the race, the positions remained mostly the same until the ultimate equalisers, Logan Sargent crashing, bringing out the safety car, and the Ferrari strategy of Leclerc dropping him down the order. Norris and Hamilton were able to jump Leclerc and overtaking the ailing Red Bulls. As the race reached its latter stages, Sainz, wisely deciding not to rely on Ferrari to help him, formulated his own strategy on the fly, bringing Norris into DRS range and banking on the hope that Norris wouldn't have the pace to overtake him, but would hold back the two faster Mercedes cars which definitely did have the pace to overtake him. And Sainz was right. Norris had absolutely no pace that he could use to overtake. This nail-biting finish finally climaxed when George Russell, as is customary when Sainz leads a race, crashed on the final lap. Sainz won the race and Norris finished 8/10 behind him. Realistically, Norris could have won this race, but this is Singapore we're talking about, and that is one of the hardest tracks to overtake on. So therefore, I'm gonna call it a 6 out of 10 bottle. The second incident was a sprint, so I'm not even sure if this could be included, but you know what? I couldn't care less. If you bottle a sprint, it's even worse as it's shorter than a Grand Prix. The sprint in question was the Brazilian sprint, where Norris qualified on pole ahead of the Red Bull of Verstappen. This was Norris's chance to prove to everyone he could beat a Red Bull on pace, and so naturally, he loses the lead at the Senna S, the first corner. Sometimes, man, you find new ways to annoy the living hell out of me, and we haven't even gotten to 2024 yet. 7 out of 10 bottle. I'm just going to state this right now. To any Lando fan watching, viewer discretion is advised. That is all. Alright, first bottle of the list, the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. Now you guys might be wondering why I didn't talk about the Australian Grand Prix, and that was because it was within the first 4 races, meaning Ferrari actually showed up wanting to win races. In retrospect, this didn't age well because now at this point in the season, Ferrari are back. You know what? Sue me. Now, during sprint quali, it had started to rain, especially so in SQ3. This meant that drivers relied on skill and instinct to guide the car around the track, and Norris, being British, decided to use his water no jutsu to claim pole position by over a second from the still nerfed Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. Come race day, it was dry. Lando Norris on pole in the faster car, Verstappen down in P4. Surely he would be able to win this time.
He's bloody missed it! What a prat! What a prat!
How do you bottle the lead of the race? To the pre-Canada upgrades W15. How? You know what was the worst part? He ended up finishing P6. I don't understand how he fumbled that hard. And in the main race, he lost to Verstappen by 13 seconds. God knows how he managed to lose this. It's still a mystery to this day. 8 out of 10 bottle, because it was a sprint. But for once, Norris would stop losing. It was the Miami Grand Prix, a track that I hate, both from the F1 game and how boring the races get. Fix up FIA. It seemed to be business as usual, with the Red Bull of Verstappen setting the pace, taking pole position for both the sprint and the race. Norris had qualified a disappointing P9, and it got even more disappointing as he was absolutely destroyed at turn 1 by both Aston Martins and Lewis Hamilton. He then qualified P5 for the main race. It was on track to be a mediocre weekend for the Brit. The lights go out and immediately Piastri goes from P6 to P3, jumping Norris in the process. Perez almost ended his Red Bull career early, as if he wasn't finished by this time, and everyone slowly settled down. When the pit window opened, the majority of the top 10 pitted, except for Norris, but his tyres were starting to fade. He was going to have to pit soon, and then the great equaliser occurred. Kevin Magnussen. The safety car came out, allowing Norris to box and to come out with his race lead still intact. Wait, race lead? Yes, I kid you not, Norris was leading a race on merit with 25 laps to go. Behind him was Verstappen, who was not happy in the slightest that he lost the lead. It was expected that Norris would lose the lead to Verstappen, as the green flags were waved and racing resumed. But then, Norris built a 1 second gap, and then a 2 second gap, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. It was reported that Verstappen had suffered a bit of damage from clobbering the bollard, but Norris was gapping Verstappen at an astronomical rate, and on lap 57, Norris came around the final corner to win the Miami Grand Prix. It was an emphatic victory, leading Verstappen by 8 seconds, and for that, I won't even call him lucky for the safety car timing. He saw an opportunity and took it by the horns, and for that, I have no choice but to commend him for it greatly. It was an amazing victory. 0 out of 10 bottle because there was no bottle. Come Imola, and it was becoming increasingly notable that the 2024 Red Bull was nowhere near as rapid as its former counterpart. In fact, it appeared that the rest of the grid had slowly started to reel in the Red Bulls, starting with Sergio Perez. However, as we all know, Sergio Perez has been on fraud watch since 2022, so not many people batted an eye. But when Verstappen took pole by less than 100th of a second from the two McLarens at Imola, it seemed that all was not well down at Red Bull. Max didn't pull away massively from the start either, as he usually does, with Norris within touching distance. Max then pitted on lap 21, earlier than Norris, who was fighting Leclerc. Norris pitted a few laps later, dispatched Leclerc, and then proceeded to eat into Max's lead. Lap after lap, the gap between the two disappeared until he was within DRS on the last lap. He was unfortunately unable to overtake Verstappen and finished 0.7 seconds adrift. This one, as close as it was, wasn't quite a bottle, as this was McLaren's optimal strategy and Norris hadn't made a mistake all weekend. 2 out of 10. Monaco was a similar affair, except it was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc on pole, with Norris in P4. That is how the race ended, with Leclerc winning from Piastri and Sainz. This one is quite literally not a bottle, but since his teammate beat him, I might as well put it on here. 1 out of 10 bottle. Now this segment of races are genuinely painful, so be advised I will not be holding back. It's round 9 of the 2024 season, the Canadian Grand Prix. Going into this race, there was optimism that there would be a close fight on the hands between Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari, from the look of the Miami and Monaco Grand Prix, and there would be opportunities for all 3 teams. So naturally, George Russell in the Mercedes took pole, with the exact same time as Max Verstappen. Norris was 0.021 seconds behind in his McLaren, setting up an all-time great fight for the race win on Sunday. Come Sunday, and it was raining quite heavily. Everyone started on intermediate tyres except the 2 Haas cars of Magnussen and Hülkenberg. The lights went out and immediately Magnussen made his way up to P4, with Verstappen and Russell swapping positions. With the track drying up, the Haas started backpedaling and Norris closed up to the back of Verstappen. On lap 20, Norris overtook both Verstappen and Russell for the lead of the race. Unfortunately for him, Logan Sargent still raced in F1 and had his mandatory crash mid-race. The safety car was called out and Norris had missed the pit entry, not allowing him to pit in time. As a result, both Verstappen and Russell jumped in the pits after eventually pitting, coming back out in P3. This was a major setback, but it was thankfully proven that Norris had the pace to go on and win the race. So what did he do? He stayed out on the intermediates for 1 lap longer when the track was drying out. He then came into the pits, came out into the lead, and then nearly spun whilst trying to accelerate, giving Verstappen P1. Norris eventually finished P2, but he should have definitely won that race, considering he had overtaken Verstappen for P2 at one point. This is worthy of a 7 out of 10 bottle. But wait, it's about to get even worse for the Spanish Grand Prix. In qualifying, Norris narrowly claimed pole from Max by 0.02 seconds, starting to show the excellent qualifying prowess of him and his McLaren. But not only does he lose the lead in turn 1, he loses P2 at turn 1 as well.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
His pants were pulled down by George Russell, who went around the outside of him into turns 1 and 2, taking the lead of the race. Norris eventually caught Russell and passed him, but by then Verstappen was way too far up the road and the deficit could not be cut down in time. This race he fell at the first hurdle, so whilst it's not a traditional bottle, it most definitely deserves an 8 out of 10 considering his pace and his P1 start. And now we turn our attention to Austria. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what to make of this weekend, but we will go through with it anyways. Max Verstappen had taken pole position by a 10th ahead of Lando Norris. Lando had kept him honest, and on lap 5, he dive bombed Verstappen to try and take the lead of the race, and it worked for a single corner as Verstappen re-overtook him into turn 4, which allowed Oscar Piastri to overtake him into turn 6, with Norris eventually finishing P3 in the sprint. This one was a bit of a bottle, but not a big one, 5 out of 10. And then came the main race. It was Verstappen on pole with Norris in P2 again. Throughout the first stint, Verstappen had kept a fairly decent gap to Norris until he boxed. However, he had a problem with his left front tyre, costing him 6 seconds in the pits. This gave impetus to Norris, who had great pace in the second stint once again. He erased the gap to Verstappen and started making attempts to overtake him. Each time he was either re-overtaken or shown the door by Verstappen. With 8 laps to go, he tried round the outside of turn 3, and they collided. This gave Norris a puncture and terminal damage. George Russell somehow won the race and Max finished P5 and gained 10 points. Despite how bad this sounds, it was a racing incident, and whilst it could have been avoided, it still wasn't really a bottle. I'd rate this another 5 out of 10. However, I will not be as lenient when it comes to the British Grand Prix. Coming into the weekend, it was blatantly obvious that McLaren had the fastest car and that they were the clear favourites, backed up by their times in practice. So of course, it was no surprise that the front row were locked up by Mercedes. No, I'm not joking, by the way. Russell had taken pole from Hamilton with Norris in P3 and Piastri in P4, making an all-British top 3 and an all-British constructor top 4. The McLarens were expected to make massive inroads on the Mercedes during the race, due to how much better their tyre wear was. The race began and Norris was force wide at turn 2, managing to lose P3 to Verstappen of all people, who started in P5, and it was just lap 1. Norris would manage to pass the Dutchman on lap 15 and settled into P3, and then the rain started to fall, bit by bit. On lap 18, Hamilton overtook his teammate to take the lead, but the McLarens were flying, and a lap later, Norris overtook Russell, and then Hamilton to build a sizable lead at his home Grand Prix. It was all looking great. Leading his home race from his teammate, it was Norris's to lose. The track slowly started drying up, and it became apparent that it was time to pit for dry tyres, specifically medium tyres, as they had the best grip for the remaining 20 laps. Hamilton was first to pull the trigger of pit stops, but had no fresh medium tyres and thus pitted for softs, which wouldn't last the remaining 13 laps, in theory. Norris and his team saw this, and a normal person would just pit for the fastest tyre through the length of the race, which are mediums, right? Well, not Lando Norris. He decided to follow Hamilton despite having new mediums and pitted for soft tyres. When he exited the pits, Hamilton was 2.3 seconds ahead of him due to the powerful undercut. It was now Norris's job to make inroads on Hamilton's lead. Try as he might, he was unable to cut into Hamilton's lead more than a few tenths, and his tyres slowly started to wear out as a result of not saving the tyre life, which is what Hamilton is so good at doing. What's worse, he didn't even finish P2, as Norris was overtaken by Verstappen, who put on the hard tyres, which came into their own in the final few laps of the race. Hamilton won his 9th British Grand Prix, Verstappen gained an extra 3 points to take the gap to 84 points clear, and Norris was left languishing in P3, having truly bottled the British Grand Prix. 10 out of 10 bottle. Next up was the Hungarian Grand Prix, and much like the British Grand Prix, McLaren were the team to beat. This time there were no pesky Mercedes cars to ruin the fun, and Norris claimed yet another pole position from Piastri. Surely this time, he would cruise to victory with his teammate following suit.
Bruh.
Yeah, that didn't go to plan. Norris had lost the lead at turn 1, again. He then got gapped by Piastri by over 6 seconds, where McLaren had the brilliant idea of forcefully undercutting Piastri with Norris to give him the lead. Apparently it was to undercut Hamilton though, I don't believe that for a second. They then had to practically beg Norris to give back their lead, which I think eventually will cost them dearly in terms of the championship, in ways I'll speak about later. He eventually obliged and Piastri won the race. This one is without a doubt not a bottle. It was controversial team orders, but still had the same result of not allowing Norris to win a race. 0 out of 10 bottle. On to the Belgian Grand Prix, and this was a prime opportunity for Norris to make a big inroad on Max in the championship. On to qualifying, and Max takes pole by a whopping 8 tenths, which is insane considering the pace of the Red Bull at that moment in time. This still meant that he would start P11, with Norris not having the best qualifying in P5 and Leclerc claiming pole. However, he was still ahead of Verstappen by 6 places. It was time to capitalise on the misfortune of Verstappen by losing 3 places at turn 1. It was a dismal start. He had a lack of pace compared to his teammate and the front runners, and the icing on the shit-stained cake was that Norris was overtaken by Verstappen and extended his championship lead once more. 9 out of 10 bottle. His only saving grace was that it was for a fairly minor points paying position. We moved on to the Netherlands, and once again Norris would claim pole position, this time ahead of Verstappen, and once again he would lose the lead into turn 1. It's insane how he fails to lead lap 1 after starting on pole, but at this point the track, driver and car combination was too strong for even Verstappen to handle, and he overtook Verstappen, stormed off into the distance and won the Dutch Grand Prix. 0 out of 10 bottle. Finally, he had a race win under his belt on pure pace and merit, nearly leading from lights to flag in a statement win. Would he be able to carry this winning mentality forward into the Italian Grand Prix? Well, he took yet another pole position in what was starting to become a normality, but the major question was, would he lead into turn 1? He managed to hold the lead at turn 1. And then lost it to his teammate at turn 4.
It's the history of the
Norris.
He even lost P2 to Leclerc.
Bruh.
From then on, it was a McLaren disaster class as they got outsmarted in strategy by Ferrari of all teams, who turned into prime 2000 Scuderia Ferrari when they raced at Monza for some reason. Although both McLarens overtook Sainz, it wasn't enough to stop the one-stopping brilliance of Charles Leclerc with his second ever win at Monza, 5 years on from the first. Norris would finish P3 behind his teammate, and I have no idea why they didn't swap the McLarens around considering it was for second place, and the fact that Norris would gain points on Max either way considering he was all the way down in P6. Norris could and probably should have won this race, but the reason they lost was ultimately down to Ferrari's strategy. 7 out of 10 bottle. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Norris ironically had one of his best drives ever in F1, but it started in the worst way possible, getting knocked out in Q1 due to yellow flags and a poor first lap, and starting the race in P17. He miraculously made his way to P4, overtaking Verstappen in the process as his teammate won. 0 out of 10 bottle. He maximised his points considering the circumstances, and when we got to Singapore, it was the exact same, except this time, Norris didn't bottle qualifying. In fact, he didn't bottle anything at all. He qualified on pole, actually kept the lead on lap 1, led every single lap and won the race. It would be his first Grand Slam if not for Daniel Ricciardo stealing the fastest lap in what would be his final race for VCARB. It was one of the performances that delayed the release of this video, as it made me ponder whether I was sure Max would win the championship. And then we got to the US Grand Prix, and the natural order was restored, that being Max Verstappen being on pole for straight qualifying. In the sprint race, Norris would actually make a good start, overtaking Russell and Leclerc to slot into P2 and began chasing down Max. However, he used too much of his tyres and began to drop off the Red Bull. The two Ferraris began bearing down on him, and on the final lap, Norris choked. He lost P2 to Sainz and then had to aggressively block Leclerc off to stop himself losing P3 as well. It was yet another mistake that allowed Verstappen to gain 2 points in him in the championship, and every point counts at this point in the season. 6 out of 10 bottle. Come normal qualifying, and Norris decided to shut all his haters up and qualified on pole for the 7th time this season. And I'm pretty sure you know what happens by now. Norris loses the lead and 2 more places at lap 1, turn 1. What's more, the Ferraris had supreme race pace, so he couldn't even rely on his overpowered car anymore. His only hope was finishing ahead of Verstappen. He caught up with him, and then Max turned into his 2021 variant and forced him wide. Norris did get past, just over the Mexican border. Thus, he was given a 5-second penalty, and Max gained 3 points on him to take his championship lead to 54 points. This one was probably the most consecutive bottles I've ever seen, and rightfully deserves a 10 out of 10 bottle. Any objections? No? Cool. The Mexican Grand Prix was next, and oh boy, it was something. I do have to talk about qualifying though, since Norris even managed to bottle qualifying. He was fastest in Q1, Q2, and then failed to claim pole, being out qualified by Verstappen and Sainz, who was on pole. What followed was probably the biggest shit show I've seen from Verstappen in a while, forcing Norris off twice and nearly putting him in the wall at turn 7, earning him a harsh but probably fair 20 seconds penalty. Norris would see Leclerc choke for once and would finish P2 with Verstappen down in P6, 1 out of 10 bottle for qualifying. And that brings us to the Brazilian Grand Prix. Norris and Piastri locked out the front row for sprint qualifying, with Piastri ahead of his teammate. Piastri then proceeded to dominate the sprint, with Lando a few seconds behind. This was until Hülkenberg's hydraulics gave up the will to live, bringing out the VSC, but not immediately. They waited a whole 40 seconds to allow McLaren to order Piastri to give up his sprint win for Norris before finally calling out the VSC. Norris eventually won the sprint race and gained 4 points on Verstappen. So far so good, 0 out of 10 bottle. He then made his weekend even better by claiming pole position in the wet. What made this pole so sweet was that Verstappen was knocked out in Q2, finishing P12. He also had a 5-place grid penalty for changing engine components, meaning he would start the Brazilian Grand Prix in P17. This would be Norris's race to lose, one that was vital in the championship. His closest rival would start on the penultimate row. This is the one race he could not afford to bottle. No matter what, he must not lose. That's it. I'm done. I'm actually I can't be bothered with this guy, bro. I actually can't. I can't. He managed to lose the race. Hell, he didn't even finish on the podium. And the podium consisted of one Max Verstappen from 17th and 2 fucking Alpines. I'm done with this fraud. I'm sorry, I can't even analyze this race like the previous ones. It just pisses me off so much. Even excluding the unfortunate timing of the red flag, he was still in the fastest car. So he could have had the pace to match the cars ahead, not go wide into turn 1, drop to P7, and then once again have to ask his teammate to let him by for P6 of all places. And the worst bit? In his post-race interview, he called the Alpine and Max's finishing position luck because of the safety car and the red flag. This is coming from the man who started on pole and finished P6. This is why Norris slander is at an all-time high, because of comments like these. This race is most single-handedly lost in the championship and shown everyone the gulf of racecraft and possibly talent that Max has compared to Lando in the most humiliating of ways. Despite what you may think after watching this video, I'm not a Norris hater. I would love to see a new champion on the grid for 2025, and to see someone bring back this amazing experience of viewing a title battle. My issue is that it could have been a lot closer than it actually is, but for some fairly immature mistakes from both McLaren and Norris, which needs to be ironed out if they are to be regular championship contenders. Furthermore, I believe he needs to fix this if attitude. After nearly every race he has lost, he keeps coming out with this term, "we could have won if." This is prevalent after his interview at the Brazilian Grand Prix, with him using the term luck a lot. The if but maybe way of thinking will only harm him in the long run mentally, and it would be best if he accepts what happens and moves on. Despite my early opinion and probably now the fact that he won't win it this year, I did hope the best for Norris's title hopes, and despite my allegiance to Ferrari, it would be quite cool to see McLaren win a championship once again. Some of the fans though, please check yourself. I've seen too many delusional takes on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok. And speaking of those platforms, you can follow me now on all 3 links in the description. That's my thoughts on Norris and its extensive bottle jobs of races in the past and present. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe and check out some of my other videos too. You're starting to build a catalogue pretty quickly. Before this video ends, I do want to say a massive thank you and shout out to George Brussel, who supported my channels, which was amazing to hear, and Polmat Racing, who allowed me to use a meme of his for my thumbnail. They're both extremely funny F1 meme pages, and you can follow both of these on Instagram. They'll be linked in the description. George Brussel also does have a YouTube. I would like you to go and subscribe to that as well. That's all from me today. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure waffling at you guys today. Have a great day and goodbye.